Because.
All right, everyone, I think we'll go ahead and get started with the April 16th Planning Board meeting. I'd like to, well, we've already welcomed Bradford. Paul Kerrigan will be a new alternate. Appreciate you coming on to the Planning Board very much. Yeah, let's get straight to it. First order of business would be the approval of the minutes from March 26th meeting. Did anybody have any changes, comments? Yes.
It actually has to do with the guests. Do we want to list Celia's last name as she's a minor?
No. Yeah, no. Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah.
I didn't think so. So I'll make that correction.
Yeah, I didn't think, right. Thank you for bringing that up.
On page 7, there's a yellow area that I didn't know what was said. So maybe somebody can tell me. You see,
I think you can reference back to public hearing. Sorry for the fragmentation.
probably made sense at the time. It probably made sense at the time.
Yeah. Okay. This links back to the prior sentence, speaking about trying to have flexibility in the conservation subdivision as it's reviewed, because of the complexity of the ordinance. As more we read it, the more we find that more explicitness would be helpful. But I think that's fine, just to leave it as it sounds a little fragmented, but
Just leave it as is.
yeah, I would. It's nothing critical. It's nothing. It's just almost esoteric.
Okay. All right.
So. Well, I apologize for such a fragmented thing. I lost my focus.
I didn't have any changes. Brian, you good?
No, good.
I move that we accept the meeting minutes as amended. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Updates from the public hearing on ordinance changes. I wasn't able to attend. Was anybody able to attend? No.
Right, you were.
Yeah, I wasn't on that one, no.
Yes. She's not here. John, do you mind giving us, would you?
Great job.
Oh, okay, yep.
The language and intent, I think the beginning did a great job explaining it, so there's another public hearing coming up, so I think Mercedes covered the planning board.
Okay,
Very well.
cool. Thank you.
Are there
Glad to hear that.
There were changes that will come up
Okay.
for the next
Public hearing.
public hearing.
Can we get copies of those changes?
Becky Taylor Shakes gets them, she's gonna put them on the website and send them to the planning board.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I guess the only other one from that is I saw you emailed Marcia about the short-term planning ordinance. I didn't see a draft of that anywhere.
I didn't have it at the time, so I'm not sure where it is. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was passed.
That'll probably be another interesting one just to look at.
There were just a couple little edits to it. Yep. And the YouTube video is up. It was, if a select board meeting could be interesting and not put you to sleep, this one was actually pretty good. It's.
Sure.
So what, was it passed or are there more changes and it has to be voted on?
John?
Short-term rental was able to make some changes, so the next select board.
Okay. And was that, I'm sorry, John, was that an ordinance that, a policy? Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking, so that, okay. All right. I think we can move on from that. We'll look forward to the changes. As far as new business, review the draft annual report that is due tomorrow. I thought that looked great, Marcia. I didn't have any changes.
Duplicate anything. Okay,
It's really, it turned out good.
Yeah,
It reads
I
well.
thought it was,
very well.
thank you.
I'll send it along.
The next item under new business is to review the punch list that Tom put together for us. Let's just, if you want to take a couple minutes and just kind of review that with us.
Sure. What I'd like to do is walk through portions of it that I'd like to highlight. Also, this will shorten my town planner report, and I'll just focus on one other major highlight that you'll all be very interested in. Because this is the first real mobile home development, even though in the context of a minor subdivision, the construct of the mobile home ordinance weaves together site plan review, and tucked into that, of course, the state statute. So there's a lot rolled into one thing. And so what I decided to do was to try to create a checklist, punch list, if you will, that weaves together these ordinances. I want you to be particularly attentive to the fact that this is really a part one of a two-part punch list, okay? Why should that be? Why shouldn't we just have a checklist that applies to everything? Because there's unknowns. There's certain unknowns on the subject property that will be discoveries that will be made, everything from soils, ledge, drainage systems, pre-construction, post-construction. And some of those things we can't evaluate properly with a generic term on the checklist. So what I'm suggesting here, after the discovery process, we'll be able to then maybe even add to this list. So the purpose of the checklist is, or punch list, whichever term you prefer to use, is basically to keep track and a record of what's submitted and what's not submitted. And in some cases, what's submitted may be still deficient. And that's the job of us to take a hard look and to make sure that it has the credibility and the approval of other agencies, even beyond town staff and the planning board. Such is the case, and I want to, well, first let me just say I broke it into two components. Typical documentation items that have overlap in each of the three ordinances that pertain to this particular application. So you have plan submission, the basics, but on the final plan documentation items, I want to draw to your attention, unless the chair would like me to go through each one of these, they're pretty self-explanatory.
So I think you could probably just go through and highlight what you think is important.
Well, a couple things that are critically important, and these are critically important to the CEOs, because Tim and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe the town has ever seen or used an HHE 220. So and Bill, have you ever seen or heard of one being used? The HHE 220 is a lot more elaborate process because what it speaks to in simple terms is a highly technical engineered plan that goes beyond soils. And the system is more complicated, more sophisticated, and needs DEP approval. And that's the difference between that and the traditional type of subsurface systems that are used. There typically is reluctance on the part of applicants to use engineered systems because they are complicated. The capital costs are more upfront. But in this particular case, it's really important to take note of the fact that there's another 40-ish acres, between 30 and 40 acres that is contiguous to this that is in the same family tree. It is apparent, the applicant has brought to my attention, and I think to many others, that this is just the first phase. So as a result of that, looking at it from a planning perspective, and I'm going to take off my public planner hat and put on a private planner hat, as a consultant, you'd want to attempt to do a master plan for all. Even though it's coming in as a minor subdivision, it's really at least a two-phased ultimate development. And so as a result of that, I've mentioned over the last series of months how important a master plan would be. It's not required, okay? HHE 220 is not required by ordinance. And I felt that it was worth asking. If I were the private planner designing this system, knowing I had another 30 plus acres that would become phase two, I would want to look at an engineered system. The reason being is that if it's over-designed, it has the capacity to absorb part of phase two. And it's all about over-design. You virtually never have an under-design, but sometimes you have right on the line design. And so I would hope that there's some wisdom in at least pursuing that with the applicant. So you'll see three or four references to the form, and even a reference that if they did go with an engineered system, that all their fees were paid outside and above the fees that are paid to the town for subdivision, because there's a specific state fee. Why there's more and more reluctance to go this way is the DEP. And that's not said in a derogatory way. It's just that it takes a lot of time. And now that the system up there has changed, there's a high degree of frustration about when you're going to get your answers back. And they're typically not in a timely way. So that's usually where the resistance comes. But the town, I would encourage the town to more and more be looking at least proposing or putting in the ordinance that in the case of large-scale subdivisions or ultimately large-scale subdivisions, that these type of systems be looked at. I've worked on engineered systems before. I really love the way they work, particularly if they're over-designed. Because think of the big picture. The big picture, members, is that when the next phase ultimately comes, you have to have 200-foot radiuses from your your wells and your subsurface systems. You have a whole bunch of details, and it's going to, I think, make for a much more complicated plan. It's the board's choice if you wish to pursue it. I did meet and had a very lengthy conversation with the applicant's engineer today. I enjoyed it immensely because he was focused, and he's a good engineer. The engineer is James Garland from Mainland. I've seen the work of Mainland. They're close to a 40-year-old company, and most of their principals and vice presidents live in Perfield Town, so they know the area. But I had a very good conversation, and part of that conversation was grounded in engineered systems. You know, would they pursue it? The jury is still out.
Tom,
Yes,
I mean, specifically, that's just a shared system or that's just another level of shared system?
it's a much higher level of design, and it is a shared system. Some people erroneously refer to it as a cluster system. It's a cluster subsurface system. It really gets into the next level of science in the design of a subsurface system.
Each fields or different pits.
Yeah, bacteria and, you know, flowages, and they look more seriously at both pre and post-construction changes in the topo. Yeah, it's, in my opinion, I highly recommend that the town look more aggressively at it. And there's no magical formula. Tim, Bill, and I could get together and say, well, anything over 20 units has to go engineered systems. But that would be the wrong thing to do, because the difficulty in ordinances is creating arbitrary types of caps, you know, if it's over this or under that. It should be on a case-by-case basis, because it's really situational, a situational review.
So, can you explain a little more if it's not in our ordinance, but we may want to have it as part of this checklist? What's our process as the planning board?
Well, that's why I proposed it first, because I can take the bumps and bruises. It's easy for an applicant to come and say, but board, it's not required. In a court of law, they would probably win. I always like to go one step additional that makes your process of review and the outcome better. And I'll be doing, I've done the same thing with the conservation subdivision, asked for a couple of things that aren't in the ordinance that exists.
We don't have to vote, the planning board doesn't vote on it.
No, it's whether or not the applicant wishes to pursue it and if staff wishes to encourage it. So mine was more of a conversation of encouragement. I've mentioned it to Mr. Brady. I've mentioned it to Mainland Development Consultants, his civil engineers, and they may choose not to because they won't want to wait for the DEP process. It takes anywhere from 4 months to infinity. And there's a great deal of frustration out there, sometimes even on single-family homes, that there's a lot of impervious surface and it kicks it up under the Site Location Act. It frustrates a lot of people. They claim they're understaffed, and I found out today, some of them won't even receive phone calls. So you're doing everything digitally. I guess the key thing is apply what I commonly refer to as the fairness doctrine. Okay, it's not required. I'm calling it out in this punch list that it's not required, but your planner highly encourages it. If it doesn't happen here, it's likely it could happen on the next phase, or should happen definitely on the next phase. And that gives you some breathing time to adjust the ordinance if you wish. These are sort of test models, the test balloons, if you will. I sent up a test balloon on this one. I sent up a test balloon also with the conservation subdivision that I'm going to tell you about. Okay. And so no pressure on the board. Okay. I'll take some bumps, bruises, and punches, but in my mind, it's the way to go. But what does that mean? You're the board that votes. I'm the one that only offers some advice. The other things that are on here on this punch list outside of that, there is a real need to get a lot more clarity, given that there's an off-site, the pump station has not been located yet. I can tell you, according to the civil engineer, that the soil testing will begin in earnest within the next 2 weeks. If it doesn't begin within the next month, I doubt they'll get this whole thing done in 6 months, because the soils are a huge determinant. And that's where more discovery will be made. So it's really critical that the pump station and also the maintenance of the pump station needs to be part of this. Now, this is something, again, that's not really called out definitively in the ordinance, but it's tied into the subsurface system. So pump station has to work because it's going to push everything uphill. And then also, anytime there's going to be a mechanical structure that's going to be part of either subsurface system or anything else on site, there needs to be a maintenance agreement, and that the entire cost of that is the responsibility of the applicant. That drives the question, does the planning board wish to think about, because this comes at the tail end, performance bonding? Okay, because there'll be a fair amount of new infrastructure that will go in there. I had a brief conversation with Tim about the importance of determination on the slabs. If this is going to be 4 units on slabs. I think an important question to ask, is it a super slab or is it just a ordinary slab? There's a huge difference between those types of, in the nomenclature of slabbing. And also the finished elevations. So the finished elevations are always typically part of the plan, so that each location will have a designated finished elevation. And then the code officers will verify those elevations, or peer review can in fact be called in to verify. And I think we always have to be thoughtful about how can we make the really tough job of code enforcement have as much clarity as possible. But I think our discovery process within ourselves is going to happen on these 2 projects, this minor subdivision and the major conservation subdivision, which I'll be telling you. Realize that Tim and Bill may have additional things. The weirdness of the way the mobile home ordinance was constructed is that there's different sort of levels of standards, and they all speak to stormwater, but at much different levels. Site plan review is more complex. So the weaving of those together, the good news is I believe that the board is going to have a good civil engineer with a good portfolio, wanting to do a really good job. We had, again, a very long conversation this morning, and it was very productive. I had a greater sense of comfort that some of the more difficult things were going to be addressed. I've also encouraged the land consultant, that being Mr. Garland, to interface with our code officers so that they can be in that loop. If it's a non-engineered system, you'll be looking at it with a different set of eyes. If it's an engineered system, you'd have the benefit of our code officers plus the DEP engineers. So the other thing is more and more encouraging written documentation by staff, interface with the road commissioner, fire chief, CEOs. And because this jumps from sketch to final, that documentation, I've had a very brief talk with Jesse and also the engineer. We all agree with the same thing, that as shown on the sketch plan, it doesn't meet code. It doesn't meet standards. And I wouldn't want to be the one trying to turn a fire engine around in that. It's just that hammerhead needs to be reworked. The applicant's engineer recognizes that. And so, and I'm dovetailing all this so that it all tucks back into this. Those letters from staff are really critical. I'm sure Jesse will call out the redesign of that. Looking at it from a planning perspective, when you look at the sketch plan and you look at the 30+ acres in the back, is there going to be any connectivity? And that should be a legitimate question that should be asked. Didn't put it on the checklist because there is no master plan for the back, but I think the conversation should be had. Landscape plan. This is something I think these two subdivisions are going to hopefully drive the community to be more thoughtful about landscaping. Landscape plans aren't going to Walmart's and buying a 2-year-old juniper and doing a cluster of junipers. That's wrong. It really has to be a really true landscape plan that speaks to when there's a need for buffers, neighbors that may need a visual protection, using the appropriate type of indigenous trees that work well. I put that provision in there, not as a burden to the board, but to something, when I prepared this, I wanted to have some input on that because one of my former businesses is a nurseryman and a landscape architect designer. So I just felt we could build some nice coniferous trees or whatever is nice and indigenous to the area. And I believe at the last meeting, the applicant did, he was the one that brought up the word aesthetics. And aesthetics and good landscaping are Siamese twins. So I may have spoken too long, Todd, but I wanted to weave all those pieces together.
Understood. Well, I appreciate that.
It's a good jump off point, serves as a good template. And then this template could be embellished when phase 2 comes in.
A couple of questions. I appreciate you taking the time to do all this for sure. I find it really helpful to see everything that's required. No matter what the application is before the board, it's nice to have this concrete before us. As far as all of this would need to be accomplished prior to the 6-month due date or end date, which would be March.
ARC started running on March 26th.
It would be September, the September meeting. Yeah.
I think that puts it on. However, you don't want to get that on your 6-month deadline because I'm sure there's going to be some discussion. And woven into that, you have to also build in 2 other things, just as a reminder, the public hearing.
Right.
And site inspection.
Right. And how, just trying to get a sense, because of those things, trying to get a sense of what we're looking at for next steps from the planning board instead of just kind of waiting on the applicant. Where are we as far as you're concerned in the process so far?
Right now, the board should feel pretty comfortable because the 100% burden of proof now rests on the applicant. And there should be no misunderstanding of those 3 ordinances. There's a lot in those ordinances. So the board is at sort of a now wait until some information comes in. The proper way is to have everything come in and review everything rather than to do it piecemeal. So I would discourage the board from looking at this as a piecemeal final plan. It's sort of an all or nothing. However, there are things like soil tests that would benefit the CEOs to see in advance. And so I've advised the civil engineer to give an advanced barometer reading, depending on which type of system they use, so that the CEOs can see that. And they can report back to, we're not sure about the submittal. So, so a lot's going to happen from the applicant's perspective. The field work begins, like I say, for soils in 2 weeks. I would say at your next meeting that you might want to invite the applicant and just find out how can we set up an appropriate site review. But you don't want to waste your time unless the site is flagged, the designation of where the systems are going, and much more detail on the contour for both pre and post construction. Okay, the contours aren't even labeled, and I put in the checklist because there's always an easy way to extrapolate the information. But in this case, it should be field topoed, because there's going to be a cut and fill operation that it's impossible to do without cut and fill. So wait until there's some substantive information. I think the code officers will see next. I've given everything I have to the civil, and he knows precisely what he needs to do to get to a final plan.
Okay, I guess my point is, there's a few things in the checklist, like the landscape plan and stuff like that, where I think the board has a role in discussing that with the applicant. And I'm unsure if waiting until the submission of a final application would be the appropriate time to talk about those things, because it's kind of,
It's a point well taken. The landscape plan is probably the easiest part of this whole thing, but it needs to be executed properly. I certainly can start the conversation with Mr. Brady, and I think he's willing to make that commitment. Someone has to draw up a plan so that if you do have a performance bond, that's where the bond comes in handy. If it says 8-foot balsam fir, and you get 4-foot Scotch pine or white pine, that's unacceptable. So usually, typically, the landscape plan is fairly simple. It calls out specifications as to the species, the size of the species, the location of the species. Let's say there's neighbors that would like to see a little bit of a visual block. So they have to be strategically planted. Typically, in our old landscape firm, we would triangulate the species so they had more room to grow. And so they started to fill in. It really created a nice buffer versus, the linear, put them all in a row like soldiers. And
I was just kind of using that as an example.
that's a good one.
My point being is, I don't feel that the board is here to babysit the applicant. The applicant needs to do all of these things. And I'm just thinking, is there an appropriate time where we should be reviewing things with him prior to a submission of a final application? Or do we just let it ride until he comes back before us at this stage, looking at your punch list?
Might I suggest, because that's the easiest component, but yet it also may be subject to debate if there is no true landscaping. Maybe, well, if the board wishes, I can be on the phone to Mr. Brady tomorrow and say, look at this as one of your additional components. Mainland might not be the people that do that. I don't know if they have an LA on board. But someone
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go, I'm not talking about the landscaping. I'm talking about the whole project. I'm talking about like, what is what are we expecting? We've got this list of all these things that need to happen. Are we just gonna wait until the September meeting and review all of this? He needs to come back before us at some point. That isn't in the checklist. We need to know when it's appropriate to do a site review. And we need to know, I think it would be important for us to, or maybe this is just the, and I have to apologize, I'm just thinking out loud as I try and think about the timeline of this complicated project. We've got a plan for a site review. As far as wastewater, and I'm not like, we don't need to speak about these specific items at this moment. I'm just thinking about how this is all gonna lay out over the next 6 months, 5 months at this point. So with the landscaping, with the wastewater management, is the town planner, yourself, the CEOs, are they reviewing all of these things prior to all of this coming before us for the final application, or do we need to catch up on this at some point? I'm done. Yes.
Yeah, that's my question exactly. Where do we integrate with the, I think we have to have the soil test pits for sure,
Yep.
and then some stake on the, we have to know what wastewater system they're going with. That would be critical.
What type of system, engineered, non-engineered, soils test, results of soil test, location of pump station. And at that point, once you have that data, and I'm going to share with you what the engineer told me when he thinks to have that, then you'd be ready to go out in the field. Plus flag the systems, okay? Everybody needs that. Planner, code officers,
for sure.
planning board,
Sorry.
neighbors. So, this morning, Jamie Garland, the civil working on this project, informed me that it was the request of Mr. Brady to get all this work done and submitted by May so that it would be showing up on your June normal schedule, third Wednesday of June. I think that's quite ambitious. But I'm just relaying what the civil said was the applicant's request of him. So that's a very ambitious schedule to do all this work or most of this work. So I think, come back and reassess at your next meeting
Okay.
as to what next step would be, where you'll have a report back on soils. I feel confident they'll get the soils done before your next meeting. And that's going to be telltale as to where they're going to drop the system. I've also asked the civil engineer to pinpoint on the off-site lands, Mr. Brady's father's lands, where there'll be an easement or a full right to put in systems. And I've also advised the applicant that it would be to the town's advantage and to his advantage to do a master plan of the whole. Town's only going to review the minor, because that's what's submitted before you. But the master plan, of which we have no references in the ordinances that speak to that, that's just good planning. Okay. So I've advised the civil engineers, I've advised the applicant, and I'm encouraging the town and the planning board to look at the big picture on this one.
I guess what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking is at this point, we wait until, number one, he gets enough information so that he can stake the property to our satisfaction with what we need for the site review, for the site visit. Other than that, I don't think that we need to, as a planning board, need to worry about too much.
Sort of sit and wait until the next May meeting, and then hopefully there'll be more information.
Okay.
that will be able to facilitate the staking. You may want to just be thinking about, if nothing happens in May, the exact areas that you want staked out. I have suggested a series of things that should be staked out because it helps facilitate your site inspection.
Okay.
All right, but no, I think the board's in a very good place now. Ground rules are out there. If you like this punch list as part one of a two-part, this gets everybody jump-started.
Okay.
And when in closing, when the civil engineer looked at this punch list, he says, great, this is just what we need to answer some of our questions. The only thing that we're uncomfortable with is the engineered system. Engineered system.
I'm appreciative of you doing this.
Yeah, it's huge.
So thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. It's just, we've reached that point in the community's life where we're going to be seeing more subdivisions and bigger subdivisions. And they won't be the traditional 3 and 4 and 5 lot. In some cases, if this new state legislation goes through, the state's proposing that anything under 5 lots doesn't need a subdivision. Who knows? I don't know where that's going. So, okay, any other questions?
I guess another thing, Tom, is, I mean, is it worth adding sort of a final approval section where you have like HOA docs and things like that?
Say that again.
Is it worth adding more a final approval section as well with HOA documents and other legal requirements that we need to have?
I think most of that is going to be fairly self-explanatory and staff can get most of that work done. If there is something that we as staff can't do, the time is probably coming very close for peer review. Where if there is something highly scientific or highly complicated that none of us can give you a firm answer to, that's where a third party is called in, and that's at the expense of the applicant.
Anything else, Brian? No. Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you for that, Tom. I really appreciate that. It's definitely a useful resource.
Can I do the last part? It'll be my project
Oh,
report
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Weave it in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, after all the months that you spent preparing the conservation subdivision ordinance, here is your first one. Here's the geographic coordinates. Tim knows where this is, but we can pass a couple out.
That's right. Yep, the Cape Graph is right here on this side.
So
Say abandoned. Well, it's not operational.
some of you are familiar
Yes.
with the applicant. He's from Freeport, his family holding. They've held that property for about 75 years. With the out parcels, it's about 135 acres. The subject subdivision will be 127 acres. I'm just going to give you some vital stats. Per the ordinance, they do comply with the open space requirement. They're currently showing 62% open space. I've been fascinated by this property. I've walked only a portion of it. And it's probably one of your most unique generational lots. And as you recall, several months ago, I kept speaking about estate lots and generational lots. I think this is going to be the first of a series of potential conservation subdivisions. What makes this one extremely workable is Mr. Cram has, and his family have owned it for 75 years. And it has a lot of frontage, both on Brown and on Range Road. So that's the geographic coordinates of it on Brown, and it doesn't really show, but it bumps right into Range Road. There was, I anticipated this would come in June, but there was a real strong effort. They've been working on it for nearly a year. There's a good feeling of, I have a good feeling for the team they've put together. Mr. Cram has hired a landscape architect, surveyors, engineers, soil scientists, and put together a really good team. Owen Haskell has done a lot of the field work and plotting, the survey work. Mark Sensi is doing a lot of the geologic work. And hats off to their landscape architect. He's a real, in my opinion, star architect. And I've had a series of meetings with him over the last 3 months to kind of see how we can form this into what might be a real conservation subdivision. Here's what you can expect in that it's on his application fee. He's still working on a couple digital maps, which will probably arrive tonight, if they're not already in my mailbox. Hard copies, everything is set to go for your next planning board meeting. It's just we've got to review all the components and make sure. I feel confident because the pre-planning that we did, when you do a lot of pre-planning, it comes out better. And the Land Design Solutions out of Cumberland is working on this particular design. And what I see so far looks pretty exciting. Exciting in the sense that he's gone through all the pieces. And so the pre-meetings and the pre-briefings really, I think, made a difference because there was no misunderstanding of what this means or that means. There'll still be tweaks to it. It's not perfect. I've asked him to do a couple things that I thought would be really beneficial to the board. One of them was to do a plan set that would show you what it would look like if you did it conventionally. And now, what does the proposed conservation subdivision look like? You got to see them side by side, and then the board assesses and the public assesses as to, is this what we hoped for? Is it above what we hoped for? Is it mediocre? How can we improve it? Right now, I believe, and I wouldn't say this unless I believed it, that it's off to a good start, particularly in terms of the comprehensiveness, the research, and the team assessors. These are all real pros that are out in the field assessing. The site does have its complications. It certainly has its share of wetlands. However, some of them fall on the peripheral edge. And I think the site design in the conceptual stage looks good. Now, this is a project that's going to end up at the DEP. Okay, without question, it's heading for the DEP. So you'll be looking basically at a conceptualization of what they're going to propose and ship to the DEP. DEP could take 90, 100, 300 days next year. There's just no way of knowing, but you'll, at the May meeting, be able to get a sense of it. So that drives the question, when does the board want to actually see this site? All of you are more athletic than I am. If you feel like walking 127 acres, there's a lot of trails that have been cut through. I've walked a portion of the site. I've asked them for something that's not asked for in the ordinance that I thought would be a benefit, just to see if they would be willing to do it, and they are. I've asked them to do a drone flight so that some of these areas that have view sheds, let's face it, this is what conservation planning is all about, is that you site everything so that it has a good view and it doesn't have an impact on the environment or as much of an impact. But it creates a view shed. So the owner has agreed to do that, and as a sort of a pre-run to your field work, because you should obviously still do a site inspection, but just to get a good feel for it, given that you may not see it again until the fall time. When it gets back, right? Marcia, what's your experience with DEP?
Well, see, Estabrook's did this, SLP.
Year.
I mean, 90 days, it's supposed to be 90 days.
And now they want to do it digitally and no in-person meetings. That's what I heard today. So in any case, I think you can expect at your next meeting of several things, and I'll work closely with Marcia on this. We'll get, everything will be in a digital file so that you can view it. I have hard copies that are going to be, I think, valuable. Plus, I've asked them to put it on a drive so that it can be displayed, so the public and townspeople can see it. So Peter from Land Design Solutions from Cumberland will be preparing that, and he'll probably be the presenter, double teamed with Mr. Cram. So hopefully, I'll keep my fingers crossed. Can't promise. It's not required in the ordinance, but drone flight is going to, I think, give a really interesting perspective. And that has to be done fairly soon before we leave out.
How many lots is it, Tom?
41. 41 lots, with a handful of duplexes.
So is that just because of all that road frontage? They were able to come in with multiple places from both sides?
It came in from 3 spurs, if you will. So there's spur entry from both roads. The most critical one was the maintenance of the Stinson Homestead. Now, you'll notice on this map here, that little punch out, there's 2 lots up and above here. One of them is the original Stinson Homestead. That's going to be left as an out parcel, but the applicant's trying to take care not to hurt that view shed coming in. So I think Mr. Cram has done a lot of field work on this, and that coupled with his professional team, it looks like we're off to a good start. There'll be questions that need to be raised when it comes to discuss the stormwater management and how that's handled with 41 lots. Just so that the board's aware, you may never see it, but I've encouraged in one of the 3 spurs to do an engineered system. The density is a little bit heavier. It's where the duplexes are. Just makes a lot of sense.
So
It's
they're
a
pushing the lot size to like an acre and a half average?
No. I haven't gone through I just got it a couple hours ago. They wanted to meet the deadline so they could be in May. So they've used a 90,000 foot criterion. There's going to be, I think, my first look at it, that there may be a request for some waivers, which is the way you've constructed the ordinance, because it's impossible to, it'd be great if every tract of land was the same. So you got a lot of situations that you have to, physical elements that you have to deal with. Again, this is where engineered systems make sense, because you can do much more consolidation. So 41 lots is the current conceptual layout. There'll be, I would suspect there'll be some dimensional requests.
Well, yeah, but just the rough math of 48%, so 62% conserved and 48% of 127 and 40, that's 1.48. So
Plus your impervious surface. And to do it conventionally, I think they came, and I'm doing this from memory because I just got this a couple hours ago. They were looking at close to 9,000 linear feet of road, or if you built it out conventionally. To do a build out non-conventionally through conservation subdivision, it looks like that linear footage is just a little bit over 4,000. So you've cut down your impervious surface by nearly half. That in itself is a huge bonus, a real bonus. So there's a lot of components to it. I encourage you to be very patient in terms of this is not going to be a fast process. There's a lot to look at. When I look at the conceptual checklist, there's just the basics. It's not, getting into any of the other details than we have on our checklist, which is a checklist that was approved by the planning board. Yeah. So all this is fresh new stuff. This was a busy day. A good day. Good day.
So we can expect them to present at the next meeting.
And I've asked them to synchronize with our town administrator, who's the keeper of this room. And so that they'll be checking with Becky so they have everything set up properly in advance.
Okay.
Because I just thought that would be handy for the public as well as the planning board.
Okay.
The public, we can just plug in a jump drive.
Right into that.
It's always good to do it a little early.
Yeah, maybe even a dry run. So I've asked Peter of Land Design Solutions to come in to meet with Becky because she prefers, she has a system.
Okay. And so we'll likely want to think about a site visit at the next meeting.
I think when you see what I anticipate in the drone flight, there may be areas that you want to highlight. So in advance, we want to have some paper copies, and as they're going through, and I've asked them to set up stations so that if they're at station 3 or 4, they can highlight that. You can say, oh, this is an area we want flagged out. We want to walk in this way and see this because we see this big wetland here. And that way you'll be able to get a better handle on it. Now, they're not going to lay out the whole road system, 4,000 feet of road or 5,000 feet of road, but at least you'll know entry points and anything that you want to flag out. My advice is after you've seen that drone flight, assuming it gets done this week, then you'll know exactly what you want to see first. And it may end up being 2 site inspections, but the critical pieces will be, I think, seeing how the homestead is going to be tackled, that entry road, and then from the range road, how we plan to design that.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're off to your first conservation subdivision a month earlier than I thought.
I'm not near as excited as you are. I can't.
I know. Oh, right.
I'm sorry. All right. Yeah, so I do look forward to seeing how it all plays out. Let's move on to CEO update. If you guys have anything you wanted to chat about.
Yes, in addition to we always have building permits, plumbing permits, electrical permits, but and also the inspections. The more we inspect, the more the builders are finding out we're inspecting and the more they're calling us. Sometimes, for example, we got a call the other day to inspect to have CMP hook up the power. CMP has to be approved by the CEO before they'll actually turn on power. So Tim went out and to inspect the service entrance, and they hadn't even hooked it up. The panel wasn't even installed yet. So if we hadn't gone out to inspect, and if CMP had come out, someone could have been killed because you'd have 2 big lines. So it's interesting that they're calling when they really aren't ready. Another one, we've got a couple requests for after the fact inspections, which in this case, they want an electrical inspection, but the sheet rock's already up. So, you know, it's like, but at least they're calling us. So that's very busy. Also, a lot of changes in the energy code. So the energy code, you'd get a, you know, let's say R30 in the walls, R60 in the ceiling, but you can also offset some of that with solar nowadays, which we're seeing a lot of solar installed as we have in the past, but also now more batteries. And the new IRC 2021 code has more restrictions on where batteries can be installed due to the fires from lithium ion batteries. Sometimes they need, depending on the area, you have to have 5/8 sheet rock around the entire battery. You might have to have those barriers if it's in your garage so the car doesn't go up against the batteries. A lot of different changes in the code, always keeping us busy. That's pretty much it.
Appreciate that. Communications,
Well, I got a request from the Capital Asset Planning Committee on capital expenditures, and Todd and I emailed back and forth, and we don't anticipate any expenditures, so I'm fine with that. Since the agenda was received, I got 2 more communications. One from Gabriel De Cristina, comment on short-term rental policies that were received on the 14th of April. And then also, town administrator told me about Paul Caribou, nominations as an alternate. And he will be official once he takes care of it.
okay,
And that was all mine.
okay. Anybody else have anything to add? No. There's, we appreciate the public being here. Do you guys have anything you want to say? Yeah, help yourself.
Look through the checklist, and it looks like a good checklist.
Just do me a favor, just reintroduce yourself and
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
where you live.
Russ Allen, 939 Elmwood Road. My house is directly across from the trailer park. So yes, I like the list, and I assume the engineer will be going through this list. Yeah. And then just a quick comment on the septic. I really think the board should insist. I mean, it's 4 houses on this system. It really needs not to be on easement land. It needs to be on owned land. You know, in case there's problems, you know, there's no fighting over getting to it and fixing it and so forth. Just my feeling. And then the other issue, you know, because I live right there and I look at it all the time and think about it all the time. The water, I assume, according to here, that'll be test wells, make sure there's enough and good enough. So I don't know where that's gonna be. Not only nobody does yet till we get a plan.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
okay, no, thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, I mean, we don't know any of that stuff right now, so we're looking forward to getting that information so we can make better decisions. Go ahead.
I have a question for Tom on the timeliness of the conservation subdivision. There's a timeline for you guys to approve or disapprove this plan. So if DEP is going to be involved and it could take up to a year, does it make sense for them to come and apply before they really know how long that's going to take?
Good question.
The answer to that question is, first, the applicant has to get a barometer reading of this concept. That was the whole, I believe behind the conservation subdivision. So you could see conventional and conservation. When he gets into this new time limits, the board and or the applicant, usually the applicant drives and says, I'm going to need an extension of time. It wouldn't hurt for the board to ask that question the night of the presentation. Well, when you leave here and you go to DEP, how long do you think it'll take? See what kind of answer, that person, Peter, will have for you. So this is I think it's gonna be a long, drawn out process. And there's none of us that can predict what happens when it goes to the customer.
I think we did an extension for Estabrooks, because that was over 9 months to 12 months, right?
That's the fair, legitimate way, and I think, the bigger question is, at what point do they submit to DEP? Traditionally, that's at the preliminary plan stage. At the preliminary plan stage, then they'll be able to forecast out their best guess, somewhere between 3 months and 1 year, that we'll get a state of. So it's likely there'll be a need for an extension. That's usually the burden of proof is on the applicant. But certainly the board can pose the question, say your town planner has advised you that he doesn't know when you're going to get DEP approval. Do you know? And see what he says. Because none of us know. Everybody's going through the same dilemma. Even people doing single family houses that are next to wetlands have been waiting a half a year.
So the other comment I have is in both of these projects, don't forget about your ability to have peer reviews.
Yes.
These large projects or complicated projects like this, it's going to be a good tool for you to use.
I agree 100%.
The good news is the burden of proof is on the applicant and the complete expense is on the applicant. So there's no financial constraints for the community. Has it been practiced before, Tim, using peer review?
Not to my knowledge.
In the historical research I did, I couldn't find, do you know of any, Marcia? No. This may be your perfect opportunity.
Both of them.
So the official processing time for, would be 120 to 195 days. That's the official.
From the DEP? Yeah.
DEP is claiming that they're understaffed and that it's taking, they've got some new rule. When they get to 30 applications, it falls into a new review system in terms of when they respond or how they respond. And that may be the very reason that Mr. Brady doesn't pursue an engineered system on a minor subdivision. That it would fundamentally probably push him into next year. Assuming all his site work gets done in the next 30 to 40 days, so
But he might need to, based on limitations of the property. Yeah, so we'll see how that all plays out. So next month's agenda, I'm assuming new business will be this new Brown Road subdivision.
Yes, it's going to be called Stinson Farm Conservation Subdivision. Title they put on it.
And that's probably enough new stuff.
I think we'll get an update. Brady will have an update. Brady.
I was gonna put that under old business.
I could request tomorrow morning to have Mr. Brady here so he can give an update and maybe even bring his civil engineer with
I
him.
don't know if he needs to, it sounds like we're gonna kind of have a busy night. I would just like to know what the status is. Does he have enough information for us to consider planning a site visit? I guess that's really the first question that we need to, as soon as that's done, we need to know that so we can start thinking about.
Unless his team of soil scientists and backhoes spends the next 30 days on site, I don't think that's a possibility.
So then I'm not gonna worry.
There's a lot of work to be done.
So I don't see any value in asking him to come, but if we could just leave it up to you to just give us a status update on where he is.
Could do a status update, or I could tell Shane to be here in case something surfaces that day.
Yeah,
Or the civil engineer makes a discovery and needs to ask the board, I've got to pivot and do it left instead of right.
he's more than welcome to come. I'm happy to have him. And if he has something that he needs to bring before us, we'll certainly give him the time.
Right now, we're not gonna call that as a separate agenda, item. We'll just be part of the planner update.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yep.
I have a question.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Do you do old business first here at the meeting, and the new business will follow? I'm just thinking about
We do old business first,
do old business.
right? So that'll be at the beginning, so you don't have to sit through if you wanted to come. But we won't be talking about that under old business unless
Unless there's something to talk about.
yeah, unless there's something to talk about.
I can check with,
You can look, yeah,
closer to the meeting. time.
right.
He's gonna be here.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
If there's a time, Russell, to flag, I would say in a 2 to 3 week window, or you'll see the backhoe when it's coming in, because that's going to trigger the soil testing. Today, again, I was told that soil testing would start to occur within the next 2 weeks. So that should be the beginning of the discoveries.
And I think that's it. So, wraps it up. Okay, second. All in favor? Motion passes. To everybody. Yeah,